Well, it's such a pleasure to be sitting in conversation with Jennifer Siebel Newsom. I wanted to just share with our audience, if they don't know, some of your really impressive accomplishments. This is your third documentary as a director, the film we've just viewed, The Great American Lie. You've produced two other films and won an Emmy for one of those. You are the founder of the Representation Project. We've had some really lovely partnerships between our organizations, including on our Super Bowl tweet up. I know we've done some really great stuff around kind of consumer feedback on the biggest advertising spend day of the year. And then, kind of as a PS, you're the first partner of California and a mom to 4 kids. So a very high capacity woman, someone I've respected for a super long time. I just wanted to welcome you.
Thanks, Kat. Back at you. I adored you and respect you so much. And I'm so proud that you're doing this, continuing this movement and this conference. So thanks for your incredible leadership.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I wanted to just like go down memory lane a tiny bit with you before we dive into the film, because I have a very vivid memory of the first time I met you. And it was the year 2011 where you launched Misrepresentation, the documentary, and I had been hearing about it and finally decided to go see it. It was being screened at PG&E in San Francisco. They have a huge theater there. And I remember afterwards you were being interviewed on stage, kind of like we're doing now. Yeah. And I raised my hand during the Q&A and stood up, and I remember exactly what I said to you. I said that your film had suggested something but not overtly stated it, but that I wanted to overtly state that one of the reasons that advertising is so punishing to women is that women rarely have a hand in its creation. And then shared with you my plans the following year to have a conference dedicated to the lack of female creative directors. And it meant so much to me that you in that moment said, I want to support this event. And you spoke at the very first 3% conference. It was a huge shot in the arm for us to have you there. And this is your third time gracing us with your presence. So I just wanted to say it's such a full circle moment to now be me interviewing you.
Yeah.
This third documentary. So thank you for being here.
Of course.
And I just wanted to start with the film itself. I've watched it twice, and there's something so prescient about the fact that you made this film. I'm guessing you made it within the last 18 months or 2 years, or how much time?
I mean, I've started working on it years ago, so that's always the process, right? I actually started working on it when I was making The Mask You Live In, because of the connection between the masculine and our values and as a society, and so it's been in process for a long time.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at how its launch this summer and fall is just coinciding with all of the issues that you lay bare are happening on the world stage. It's just unbelievable. How does that, I mean, you couldn't have forecasted that. How is that impacting your feeling about the urgency of this film?
Yes, no, thank you. I mean, look, I think what's interesting is COVID-19 has really unveiled the weak links, the systemic inequity, the oppression in our society, and the fact that we are in this mess, I believe, because we haven't put enough emphasis on care. We haven't placed enough value into care and into education and broadly into the care economy. And so it shouldn't surprise us in America. Obviously, a certain type of leadership would have protected us perhaps in the very beginning at the federal level from this pandemic in a way such that I don't believe we would necessarily be where we are today. But you know, if you look at American values, historically, we valued power, dominance, control, money over empathy, care, collaboration, and partnership. And we value those masculine traits over those feminine traits, which are essentially human traits. But we've devalued them because we feminize them. And so to me, what's so prescient is we were already headed in this really scary direction where 0.1% of our country own as much wealth as the bottom 90% combined. That inequity was already headed towards a situation that was worse than the situation prior to the Great Depression. And the pandemic is making it even worse. I mean, I can speak to recent statistics in California in particular, in terms of unemployment numbers, but across the country, when we get out of this, you know, unemployment's going to be skyrocketing, poverty's going to be skyrocketing, inequality skyrocketing. We know that certain billionaires have gotten richer during this pandemic, whereas the majority of the workforce, the majority of essential workers who weren't paid enough to start with, who didn't have the benefits of flex time and childcare, and, you know, like, who are struggling and at the forefront of the epidemic. We know predominantly that the essential workers, they're women of color, and they're communities of color. So not only are they the ones being hit by COVID the hardest in a certain regard, but they're also on the front lines daily, underpaid, not having their children be cared for, their children be educated. So coming out of this, not only is there going to be incredible economic inequity, but there is going to be a lot of mental health issues that we won't have dealt with as a society, that no one's really immune to, but that we're seeing, you know, if there's a certain element of privilege, you can buffer yourself to a certain extent. And so anyway, this is so timely because we have to deal with this. It's like a mirror reflecting back to us our cultural values, just as I felt Trump was, when he was first elected, was a mirroring back to us our cultural values of power, dominance, money, objectification of women, the patriarchy, right? And this is, again, another kind of, guys, wake up, not just America, wake up world. Is it really about power? Is it really about money? Or is it really this recognition that we're in this together, that as a society, we're only as strong as our weakest link, that we have devalued the feminine to such an extent that everything that's feminine, that's care-oriented, has been deemed invisible. And now it's so visible, and yet we haven't put enough time and energy and invested enough into elevating it. And so this is like a huge wake-up call. And in that regard, I think enough people are woke or awake now that I have hope for the future. But we have to completely dismantle and recreate our systems of thinking and really move towards, you know, capitalism that is conscious capitalism, inclusive capitalism, where it's not just about, you know, the shareholders and the C-suite, but it's about the employees, it's about the essential workers, it's about paid leave and childcare and flex time and early childhood education, so that we can start to get ourselves out of this mess and become a community again, where everyone sees the humanity in each other, and it's really about our common humanity.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting to see that the countries that are faring the best, at least in terms of COVID, a lot of them are led by women. So when you talk about the discounting of the feminine style of leadership, yet it's saving lives. It's kind of an interesting case study.
It is. It's a tremendously interesting case study. It's because, and we've known this, and it's, I mean, not everyone's known it. Academic circles have known it. Intuitive, you know, educated people have known it. Women know it, but we've spent so much of our socialization invested in care, invested in relationships, less invested, and again, I'm generalizing, but less invested in money, no matter the cost. It's really, yes, you run a company, you have to make money, but you really have to care for your employees. You have to care for your community. You have to care for the environment. You have to care for future generations. You can't make products that are going to be harmful to future generations, to their minds, to their social emotional well-being. So yeah, no, we are this is like a wake-up call. And I like to think of it as a gift. You know, the silver lining is we're being a gift to assess our values, to reassess who we are as individuals and as a collective society. And we have an opportunity to get out of this mess, but it will require each and every one of us individually and collectively in small cohorts and communities to look at our own values, really go deep and re-envision what it's like to ultimately care about others beyond oneself. And, spread that message, break bread with people that are different than you, educate them about the benefits of, caring for thy neighbor. And that, again, a society is broken if it has that many broken links. And right now we have so many broken links. We are, the Black Lives Matter protests were, these have been going on forever. The inequity, the systemic racial inequity and injustice has been here forever. But it's like, are we finally going to learn a lesson and wake up as a result of the Floyd sort of situation and most recent wake up call? So again, I think we are like, it's like someone's shaking us saying, guys, wake up, wake up. You have a huge opportunity here. And so, I love your platform and position. And I think you've always been this incredible voice speaking to brands and those in the advertising community, creatives, helping them to realize that they can be a part of the solution, that the way out of this is conscious capitalism, inclusive capitalism, moral capitalism, if you want to think of it that way. But it's really about seeing the humanity in each other, recognizing our systemic injustices, and that we're only going to rise together and rise as a community in a larger society if we invest in each other, if we lead with empathy, if we lead with care, if we, again, recognize that we are in this together. There's no leak on your side of our boat. This is our boat, right?
Yeah. That's such a good analogy. And I don't know if you saw, someone had tweeted or posted something about, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And your film is about how we're all in different boats, and that we don't all have access to the same amounts of capital or housing or education. And all of those inequities create these generational inequities that just reinforce stereotypes and belief systems. So, well, the theme of our conference this year is the radically inclusive future of work. And we're looking at, what do workplaces of the future look like when they are centering, where no one's an afterthought, where it's not like you center one group and other people are an afterthought. And so a lot of what we've been talking about here at the conference is things like support for caregiving, emotional intelligent leadership instead of just IQ. We're looking at agile work environments, multi-generational workforces. So what things are you seeing, both from making this film and also in your role in California, about how workplaces are shifting to meet this moment and asking hard questions? And accountability is a word that keeps coming up for me, about leaders being accountable, like you said, for your supply chain, for your workforce, for all these decisions, because consumers have insight now. So I was curious what you've been seeing on that front.
Well, I mean, there's so much going on. It's such a broad concept. I mean, I'm invested in, from the first partner role, I apologize, my child in the background. From the first partner role, I'm so focused on, gender equity broadly, with a focus on closing the pay gap in California, in particular, focused on closing the pay gap for women of color. But obviously, again, the notion is, if we can collectively close that pay gap for women of color, the remaining communities of women will rise. Similarly, we're focused on women's representation on corporate boards, because we know, and you just articulated this, that the more of the feminine that you have in leadership, that transformational leadership style leads to more long-term sustainable benefits, like greater creativity, productivity, a better bottom line. And I'm obviously a huge proponent of those two elements, and continuing those fights, knowing that COVID-19 has actually, unfortunately, been so detrimental to women and working mothers, because women have been on the front lines, because women are having a really hard time, not just raising their children at home while working full-time, but actually having to homeschool their children, right? And not being allowed or unable to send their kids off to, basketball camp or tennis camp or whatever after school activity they had. So there's such shifts in the way we as a society are having to make as a result of COVID-19, and just where we are as a society right now, that I again, the point that you're making is, this wake-up call that employers have a lot of power. The government can do so much, but that employers really have this huge opportunity to create longevity in their organizations by creating a work-life balance that enables working families to thrive and survive. So we call it the parents' agenda in the governor's office, and it's everything from looking at flex time and paid family leave to childcare, and really investing in early childhood education so our kids get the best start in life, because we know if they get that best start that there are going to be fewer problems down the line. But I think there's a whole host of mental health work that's going to need to be done for the workforce as a result of COVID-19. We're really invested in social emotional learning and how do we prep our teachers to support our children coming back to school in the fall. And again, all this, to me, again, this just goes back to the film, which is this recognition that we have to value care. We have to value empathy. We have to recognize that this kid over here doesn't have bootstraps and can't pull themselves up because there's nobody at home for them. And in fact, they were totally lost maybe a year's academic learning, if not more, during the shutdown because they had a digital divide issue at home. They had no Wi-Fi access or no computer, right? So really meeting people where they're at and making sure that we are invested in not letting them get behind any further than they've been.
Yeah, exactly. Well, given that you know that our community is largely comprised of people in advertising, tech, and media, people in on the front lines of representation in media, which more and more, even more so than when I started 3%, I feel like media has an unbelievable impact on what we think is possible. That really stood out to me when I read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. She was very savvy about when different communities, including mental health normalization, that the media was a driving force, and to make sure that character lines and plot lines and movies and casting choices were inclusive. And so I feel like so much of what your film lays bare is an opportunity for the people listening to this interview who make those choices to be thinking about who they're casting, what the story arc is, and whose words are being brought to life. You don't just want diverse characters parroting lines that were written through the same old, writer's room. Yes. So, what would be your call to action given what this film invites us to do? Yeah. Really the co-creation of our country. But people that make media, what is our role?
Yeah, well, I think media, to your point, 100% has an opportunity to be leaders in this movement towards cultural change, towards recognizing our common humanity. We're in this together. Media can't just be about, selling products or escapist fare. It has to be a driver right now, given its power in speaking the truth, in asking questions about our values, in encouraging this sort of cultural awakening and consciousness whereby people are forced to look at their own privilege and their own attitudes and their own behaviors and shift those attitudes and behaviors based on the recognition that they probably have privilege, but that person over there has been denied privilege, and not just that person, but their parent and their grandparent and their great-grandparent, and that person doesn't have bootstraps, and that we've actually failed that person. And not only that person, we failed that entire community over there. We've failed that entire society. And so to your point, this is like the incredible opportunity for media makers in all forms and for tech to really use the narrative storytelling opportunity to speak truth to power. But also and this is the tricky part, how do we do that in a way where we're not shaming those in power or those with privilege, but we're bringing them along with us on the ride such that they recognize that there is this whole other world, this whole rainbow on the other side, where they just give just a tiny bit. They just make a tiny bit of room for these folks. And then there's like this abundance of opportunity for everyone. And there's this abundance of peace, and there's an abundance of richness and consciousness. And that at the end of the day, for me, again, and this goes back to the film, that what we're trying to share in the film, and it's why my hope that people bring this film back to their corporations and back to their communities and back to their schools, is that it's, at the end of the day, this is a film that is showing us that our value system, the founding reality, there was a founding dream and a founding reality, and the founding reality basically privileged a small cohort of individuals and institutionalized this this way of being and operating in America that's all about power and money. And ultimately, we want to dismantle that, because at the end of the day, you have all this money, you have all this power in the world. What you know, if you don't have what really matters, which is relationships and connection and community, and if you don't lead with empathy and love, and you have none of that, what kind of a life is that, right? And what a loss to people to just have the power and the money, but to have no empathy and care and connection. And so as a society, we have to dismantle that hyper masculine or patriarchal, whatever you want to call it, value system, and really bring in and really uplift and support the values of care and empathy and connection and community and partnership. And that's the only way forward. So again, coming back to our earlier conversation, media makers are being given an opportunity. There is a mirror reflecting back to us our cultural values that media has been a part of. Yes. Right? Media has been a big proponent of power and money and dominance. And really, we need to move towards partnership. And we can do it through storytelling, and we can do it through uplifting, and we will do it through uplifting the stories of marginalized and vulnerable communities. And if COVID-19 doesn't wake us up, I don't know what will, but something good has to happen out of all this. And I'm a firm believer that if we literally just hone in on our values and do the individual work and then the collective work and the community work to really kind of really like reshape and reform our thinking, our attitudes, and our behaviors, that we will transform a society. And we can be that, you know, that light, that beacon, that great democracy on the hill that we've all, you know, desired America to be. But it's going to take individual action. It's going to take breaking bread with people that are different than us. It's going to take telling those narrative stories. And it's going to take building community and recognizing again that we are ultimately in this together, and therefore we will get out of it together, but that we need each other.
Beautifully put. And, you know, I feel like the thing that I always value above everything is ideas and innovation and creativity and originality. And for me, when you invite other people into the economy, the workplace, whatever, when you share, like you said, power or access, what gets me to the exchange is so worthwhile for everyone, because that's where incremental amazing, it becomes just this multiplier of ingenuity, when a lot of people that aren't alike are coming together, and there is no shortage of problems that needed to be solved in the world right now. And so we need all the brains. We need people that don't look like us, and maybe immigrants who grew up elsewhere and have a unique perspective they bring. So I agree with you that this is such a moment to it's a reckoning, and it's a crisis that invites us into rethinking things. And that's the language of 3%. That's the drumbeat. We're all about communication through demonstration. I really admire the way you, even in very subtle ways, by calling yourself the first partner of California. It's such a small thing, but it's such a huge thing, because you're saying this isn't necessarily how a first family looks. This isn't necessarily the composition. You're opening up space for others to imagine themselves being in your role. So thank you for this film. I remember saying that about your first film, but you just keep pushing the narrative around inclusion, and that's everything I value. So I'm so grateful that you shared this film with our attendees at the event, and that your thoughts here with me, and we can't wait to see more from you. I know you don't sit still, Jen, so
no, I know. Oh, thank you. Well, thanks for being on this journey with me. We're all in this together, and I'm just so grateful to you for your leadership.
Right back at you. So, well, enjoy the rest of your summer and your kids, and thanks again for the film.
Okay, take care. Bye.